Okay, well, first of all, I heard that the pro tem said he's not a candidate for U.S. Senate. I just want to make sure everyone knows the governor's welcome to appoint me. He and I have a good relationship now. So, deadline week, I just wanted to mention quickly that really pleased with some of the bills we've passed, really focused around, of course, quality education, cost of living and affordability, and solving problems with people as the priority. One thing that's been a big concern is the lack of transparency around the budget process so far. In past years, we've been having budget hearings where we actually look at the priorities and discuss them in a public meeting, or follow-up appointments with the agencies in public so that we can talk about what might be the most important things we're going to fund or not fund. We've not been doing that. And then in appropriations, all the money has been stripped out of those bills, so we're actually voting on bills with no dollar amounts attached to them. So my concern about that is that just we're not doing the public process we've done where we help people see us making those decisions, deciding what's a priority. So I'm afraid that's all going to be done behind closed doors. So those are the two big things I was thinking about. What do you all want to talk about?
I suppose we just talk about Mullen for a second.
Yes.
What reservations do you have or concerns about what DHS may look like under Mullen?
Our big concern is, we're going to work with anyone from any party, but I'm absolutely concerned about dignity for every human being, and I'm worried about the Constitution and making sure due process is being fulfilled. So, I sure hope that Senator Mullen is responsive to the needs he hears from Oklahoma. We certainly would be glad to work with him. But no matter who's in that position, we need human dignity in the Constitution as a higher priority.
Can I ask you, it's been a little over a week since the Senate Republicans announced their education funding plan. I'm curious if you, in that time, have heard from constituents, responses and reactions from them about it, especially
Yeah.
the TRS.
Absolutely. So since last week, I've heard a lot from constituents, current educators and retired educators who are upset about the Senate GOP plan for education and how to fund it. Many people are afraid that money is going to be taken from the pensions, and so I've spent quite a bit of time learning about the pensions. I just want to first say I know my caucus would fight this proposal. I know my caucus has always prioritized making sure those pensions are sound and well protected, and we would not steal from future retirees to fund current education. So I think I need to be clearer about that. I think because sometimes I'm answering for their plan, but I should make it clear that we oppose that part of their plan and several other parts of that plan. But yeah, I've been flooded with calls, and I've spent quite a bit of time learning that pension history. And I think what we have to remember is our teacher pensions were started by the people. It was a state question. The legislature's never funded it adequately. And so we have had dedicated funding from the beginning. It just wasn't enough. And so I'm concerned that there's an implication that somehow this was money that was above and beyond, because it was beyond teacher contribution and school district contributions. But what we know is the state is catching up for a lot of years of not funding it enough. So we need that to stay sound, and so we shouldn't be pulling away from those dedicated sources of money. There's been dedicated sources of money the whole time. My understanding is when they switched it, just made it more reliable funding of sources, because when we're focusing solely on natural gas and GPT, we're following that roller coaster of the oil and gas. And so I like the fact that it's been more consistent, but it's sad for us. We should not pull the rug out from under educators right when they're getting to the point of having something we call well-funded.
Is there a plan B for funding increased needs for education?
I very much would love to be in that conversation, but I'm not. So if, with budget transparency, we could spend all day long making that plan, and it's not worth our time if we're not consulted at all. So that should be happening in the public. I know we started the year, the Oklahoma's commitment plan that the House and Senate Democrats released did include a funding stream. Rep. Pogmiller filed a vape tax, which is a huge oversight when you talk about health and kids accessing tobacco and products being in our communities that are not being taxed sufficiently. Vape tax was what we had talked about in that plan. I'd be glad to talk about other funding streams, but I'm just going to reiterate that we didn't get here by accident. Cutting taxes is why we have so many fewer options. And so if we're not willing to really admit where we are, we're going to be looking to the wrong kinds of funding sources.
The pro tem said that COLA is still up for discussion. How is that possible if they're going to, grab some of this funding that's usually diverted to propping up that system.
Yeah, the pensions, I mean, number one, we need to fight that plan, and we shouldn't be redirecting those funds. Our teachers have been putting money in. We've been, when you talk about almost a 10% contribution by school districts, the state is funding part of that too, because when we have to fund our school districts to cover that match into the retirement, we're paying for it on both sides. So number one, I don't support that plan and won't support that plan. Paul, I already forgot what you said before that.
The possibility of a COLA.
Oh, the COLA. So we did pass a 2% COLA, which frankly is not enough, nowhere near inflation. I think that could move forward. The big challenge we have is that there's some unrealistic expectations for where pensions should be in order to give a cost of living adjustment. We do not have to be at 100%. 100% would mean everyone retires today. That is not going to happen. We still have people putting into the system, and the system is in a position that's pretty healthy at this point. So the expectation that we'd be to 100% before we're truly healthy is not true. And those adjustments happen depending on the stock market. So I think a COLA can still happen, and I think we have the numbers to prove that. But I just don't want future educators punished over it.
We're going to talk about insurance for a second. I saw that Senator Paul Rosino's insurance bill passed in committee today, but looking it over, it kind of reminded me of your SB 1444. Can you tell me a little bit about why that passed and yours didn't, and how it's different from?
So on insurance bills, I need to go read his bill, honestly, because someone told me that, and I had not. Hadn't reviewed the bills that weren't in my committee, so I need to look into that. My understanding was he does switch it to file and use instead of use and file, so they'd have to be filed in advance. But I haven't looked to see what else was in him. My bill was pretty, I was pushing the fact that we need to be able to reject rates if they're excessive. I don't know if his bill includes that.
What about disapprove, like allowing the insurance commissioner to disapprove the rate if it's determined to be excessive? And
that was in my bill.
Yes,
yeah.
and I saw that, and I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, that doesn't exist right now. Our insurance commissioner can only turn down a rate increase after the fact, so the company can start charging people more before they have to prove it. And if it's a so-called uncompetitive environment, so the insurance commissioner has to say there's not enough people riding. And so what our insurance commissioner has said is we don't have an uncompetitive market, and we don't have a definition in law of what it means. So to me, it's a very squishy way to protect Oklahomans. We need to have those protections written into the law so our insurance commissioner can take that hard stand when it's needed.
Do you know perhaps any idea why his bill made it through whereas yours didn't? Is
No,
it
I'll have
maybe
to.
more of
Yeah, I'll have to ask.
party thing, or is it?
Yeah, I'll have to talk to the committee members. I'll go back and watch that meeting. I didn't realize that was on this morning, so I'll go watch it. We always have issues being in the minority party, because we do have to convince everyone that our ideas have merit. I frankly didn't. I had 2 bills heard the day that mine failed, and I knew one of them was going to fail. I knew it because it was too hard on corporations. I felt like we needed to make the point that people should come first, but I knew that one would fail. Unfortunately, that one went second, and I felt like if it had gone first, I might have been able to pass the other one. But I think it got tied together. So that's my theory. But also, it's just pushing a lot of change. So, with the way rates have increased, I feel like we should be taking more drastic action, and that if we take it an inch at a time, rates are going to be up another 50% in the next 2 years, right? Others want to be very cautious about it, and I certainly don't want to disrupt the whole market, but I think that is the language that the companies use to make us not examine changing the law. And I'm sorry, yes, things might change, so let's look at that. Let's examine how it works. So I'm looking forward to seeing what I hope Senator Racino's reform is strong, because I would love to be able to support it.
I was asked to ask about property taxes, just sort of with the recent bills that have made it out of committee, and statements by, I don't know if you saw, but there were a few statements yesterday from the chamber at a panel, and so. But if there's anything
about property taxes.
Yeah.
So I still am really worried that when we talk about affordability, we get really focused on taxes, and we should focus on that insurance piece, because that's affecting our rental rates and our housing costs. And that's going to corporations, not to fund our schools and our roads. I'm worried that we chip away at things. So today we passed a bill off the floor that would reduce property tax by changing the way broadband is taxed. Yet again, we're doing that without really knowing the impact on counties. We had kind of a general number, but we don't know exactly on counties. So I'm worried that we make these cuts without knowing the impact. And so I was glad to see that people had kind of a well thought through response to the property tax cuts when it comes to our schools, our roads, our infrastructure. I hope people can, put aside the desire for cuts, even if that would be fun, right? As we plan what would we actually do and what would we actually reduce in terms of services if we do that. So, I'm hoping that means there's a little gap that we can talk about reasonable solutions that might be more targeted towards low-income folks or seniors, or that's really specific, right? Yeah.
Can I ask you about some of the reading legislation that we've seen, especially, I know you've talked to us a couple of times about your kids were in school at that age, how the third grade retention maybe was going to be a factor, and then it wasn't, and then maybe it was, and then it wasn't. I'm curious kind of what you thought at the time as parents. Would you have been opposed to retention?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Was it more so just like moving the goalpost was the issue? Just kind of thinking of what might be going through parents' heads now.
Right. I lived the Reading Sufficiency Act with my son, especially, who's now a senior in high school, was in pre-K when the first version passed, and we really didn't know if he would get advanced. And we held him back in first grade primarily around behavioral issues that were about executive function, right? Like he couldn't sit still, there were a lot of things he couldn't do, and it ended up being great for him. But if he had then been turned around and been held back in third, it would have been really bad. You can't have 20-year-olds as seniors in high school. The data is very bad for their success rates. They drop out. They've got to help their families. They've got to move on, right? And developmentally, they're in a whole different place. So we have to think about the other end of retention and what happens when kids stay behind. So as a parent, I was pretty nervous about it. And knowing my educators didn't have much say in it concerned me. So our classroom educator of the year, my son was in third grade, said, I know he can read. I've talked to him about it. I watch him read. He tells me he knows. We have no idea if he will show that on a standardized test. He will not perform on a standardized test. And so we didn't know if our voices would matter at that time, but the law did change. So, I'm very concerned for teachers and for parents if it's confusing at all. I did talk to Senator Pugh about the phase-in of his proposal, which would at least give a year. At the time I was a parent in this situation, they were making changes in May that had to be implemented in August, which is just not a good way to allow educators to prepare for what the expectations are or prepare parents for what should be going on. So yeah, to me, a lot of it's about planning and looking ahead. Anything else y'all want to hit on?
Senator, I'm sorry, wait. Just,
that's okay.
Get a rehash of your reaction to Senator Bowen's big.
Well, my big thing is that, I really hope that he focuses on defending the Constitution and our rights and that dignity of those who are either being accused of being undocumented immigrants or being detained is a priority. I'm concerned about the length of detention, the process, and I hope that as a leader he will emphasize dignity first. I hope he's more responsive to our needs in Oklahoma, because certainly we have a better connection with him. Yeah, that's my big.